But I really don't have any regrets. I really don't. I've lived exactly how I've wanted to. I've tried my hardest every single time. I didn't win the matches that maybe I should have always won, but I really gave it my all. So that for me is enough.
Hello everybody, welcome to the Body Serve. I'm Jonathan.
I'm James.
And on this 149th episode, we thought we were going to be doing a pretty run-of-the-mill kind of boring show, and then last night, a whole damn segment fell into our laps.
We've been gone a minute, so we've been building up things to talk about, and then, as you said, the biggest news of the past few weeks came out. Naomi Osaka, recent winner of the Australian Open, has parted ways with her coach, Sascha Bajin.
Mm-hmm.
A shock? As much as a coaching change can be shocking in this day and age, this one stunned me, and a lot of people.
Yes, and then with retrospect and looking back at it and reading the tea leaves, there were signs, which we'll get to later on.
Mm-hmm.
What you thought was going to be your big tour de force, darling, on this episode was Mr. Jo-Wilfried Tsonga and his resurgence.
Storming back. He didn't play for a good 7-8 months last year, was off with a knee injury followed by surgery. He had fallen out of the top 200. Can you believe that?
Yes, I can believe it.
He, even with his title, has barely any points. He won his first title in Montpellier. He is very well versed in French ATP 250s. He's won Moselle a few times. He won Marseille, Lyon.
A large swath of his ATP titles have been in these smaller ATP tournaments in France.
Mm-hmm. But this is his first in Montpellier in the Sud de France Open.
Well, what do you got to say? All week, all I could get was, oh, have you seen this? Have you seen that?
Yeah.
Look at Joe. Look at Joe. Look at his Instagram. Look at this.
The Tsonga team has been tearing it up on social media. Been on Instagram Live, doing stories, pictures. I went through his timeline and realized I've liked probably every single picture he's ever posted, which is just a little bit sad.
Je suis un fantôme.
I feel like that was really good.
Oh, it was?
Yeah.
Oh, I did 2 years of French when I was 9 years old.
I can never
seven.
get
I was 7 years old.
the French pronunciation for the word UN. I'm not even going to say it.
Oh, lies. I was 10. 10 and 11 were my French years. It was also the class that I got my worst grade ever in. 14%. I walked to the front of the class, received it, and gagged, and then giggled all the way back to my seat.
14%. How is that even possible?
There was a lot of red on that test.
Yeah, he seems to be embracing the fact that people are into him for his personality and his looks. He must know that, right?
I mean, all you people are out here thirsting at him at every turn, so that cannot go unnoticed.
That Insta story when he said "Je suis un fantôme" and he's sort of creeping around in the background was very cute, very endearing. What's heartwarming about this is that just a few weeks ago, Jo said something that implied he might not be around for very long. He said, who knows how long I can continue doing this, how many more months? He was speaking in terms, really short-term time frame here. So a lot of us fans were kind of in a panic. But I think now that he's been playing like he is able, maybe he will reassess. I imagine it's just a lot of frustration, not being able to string matches together. But this week, he beat 3-seeded players in Montpellier, Simon Chardy in a long, dramatic match, and then Herbert in the final.
Shout out to Pierre Hugues because he's had a great start to the year. He's inside the top 40, lost today in his first round. I believe in Rotterdam is where he is now. I'm not sure, don't quote me on that. But prior to that, he had a pretty strong start to the year. And while I think that's the stat is that there's no Frenchmen inside the top 30 anymore, but there's like 72 of them between 30 and 50. That math doesn't add up, but you get the gist. It seems that maybe the French contingent is getting its shit together in 2019, to start the year at least.
Yeah, but a lot of that great French generation is aging. Many of them are over 30 at this point. Gasquet, Monfils, Tsonga are all part of the same group. I don't know who is replacing them for Team France. Hugo Humbert is one of them.
Look up we.
Yeah.
Have you had your fill of Tsonga in this segment?
I think people want us to talk about the Naomi and Sascha split.
See, I told you that this was your opportunity. The only chance you've had to talk about Tsonga is wishing that he could be a dark horse at any number of tournaments and me shooting you down. And so, no, this was your moment to shine, and you've only used 4 minutes of it.
I should say he is back in the top 150 again, rising 70 spots. That's how few points he had, that winning a 250 title shot him up 70 spots in the rankings.
Welcome back, Joe. I think you're in a bit of a hurry to get to the Sascha Naomi news, but as is typical of our episodes, we're going to get through the tennis stuff first, and then we'll get into the off-the-court stuff. So next up, we have Fed Cup. Last week was Fed Cup, and the big news of the week was the Czech team losing in the quarterfinals.
There were some blockbuster matchups in the quarterfinals of Fed Cup this past week. This is the first time that the Czech team has lost a home tie since 2009. The Czech team has been world beaters, has won Fed Cup, 5 or 6 times in the last decade. They have an incredibly deep bench, but unfortunately ran into Romania, who brought everybody.
And Simona Halep.
Right.
Which is the danger for teams in this format. When you have a world number one, even if you might think of Romania as being the weaker team, when you have the world number one able to play 2 matches and win 2 points, as she was able to, then you really come down to having to win one of the reverse singles or the doubles match. And it also kind of puts into perspective just how good the Czech team has been over the last decade, that something like this hasn't happened to them before.
Mm-hmm. On paper, this is a very tight matchup, and it played out that way. You have the number one player, Simona Halep. You have Karolina Pliskova, who has already won a title on hardcourt in January, made the semifinals of the Australian Open. You have Siniakova and Krejcikova playing doubles, who won Roland Garros and Wimbledon just last year. You have Begu and Niculescu in doubles, who, Niculescu is a confounding player to play against, and they're a great team themselves. Halep and Pliskova was a riveting match, took over 2.5 hours, over 3 sets. The decider was that doubles match, which lasted almost 3 hours. Niculescu and Begu worked that one out, and Romania upsets this Czech Republic team, and now kind of anything goes in Fed Cup for the rest of the year.
Elsewhere, the Australians traveled to Asheville, site of last February's return for Serena Williams, to beat the US team. And they were led by one Miss Eshbari.
Asheville became Asheville.
Clever.
The US team, they fielded a team without Venus, without Serena, without Sloane. It was led by Madison Keys and then Danielle Collins and Sonia Kenin.
Still a team that on paper is formidable.
Yes.
Because Kenin showed out in Australia. She's up and coming. Collins made the semifinals in Australia. And Madison is there as well. So that's not a team that should be a pushover by any stretch.
No, it's not to be sniffed at. Keys and Barty should have been a very competitive match. Madison won the first 3 games, and that was all she wrote. Barty won the next 5 games after that, won the first set, finished the match in straight sets. Danielle Collins was actually what made the tie quite exciting. This is her first Fed Cup tie for the US. It's probably an atmosphere that she thrives in. Coming from college, being a largely, confrontational player, she definitely feeds off the team vibe of Fed Cup. She managed to come back from a break in the 3rd set to beat Gavrilova and forced the 5th match of that rubber.
And in that 5th match, Ash Barty and Priscilla Hahn took out Collins and Melikar.
And Melikar, who herself is a Czech-born American, has won a major in doubles before. That's a great team too. So Ash Barty leaves North Carolina having won all 3 of her matches for Australia.
Belarus beats Germany 4-0. That was a drubbing.
Some people were criticizing Angelique Kerber and Julia Gerges for not playing, and at this point, how can you even be mad about that? They have been stalwarts for years. They are in their late 20s, early 30s. Germany should have a deep enough bench to make this competitive.
They had a deep enough bench. They had Zigeman and Petkovic, neither of whom were able to mount much of a challenge at all.
No, I mean, that Sabalenka-Sasnovich tag team at this point in history is very hard to beat, clearly. And Azarenka did not play singles, but she did play doubles and won a point in a dead rubber, beating Grunfeld and Bartel. Grunfeld, who was born the same year I was, so you know she's up there.
That is rude, because you are very old.
That was like a self-drag.
In the last tie of the quarterfinal stage, France beats Belgium 3-1. And notable in that tie was the return of Caroline Garcia to the French team, a team that also included Kiki Mladenovic, which, as you know, if you've been following the show and tennis in the last couple of years, there have been numerous incidents, drama-filled incidents between the two for whatever reason over that time.
Yeah, there was, I guess, a friendship that ended. Cornet got into a bit of the mean girling along with Mladenovic back in the day, but I guess bygones are bygones, and Garcia has rejoined the Fed Cup team.
Those semifinals will take place the weekend of the 20th and 21st of April, which is not far from now. And in France, the French team will take on Romania. And then in Australia, Ash Barty and the clan will take on Belarus. So, I mean, as far as the Final Four, that's a pretty good lineup.
Mm-hmm.
We could talk about Davis Cup, but we shan't.
Davis Cup did meet, so the week after the Australian Open. We didn't record that week, obviously. The guys were playing in the, well, sort of traditional format, gearing up for the finals in November, which is going to be in Madrid, in La Caja Mágica.
Mm-hmm. I literally just said we weren't talking about
it was just a brief, FYI. No analysis.
Okay.
Let's talk about Juan Ignacio Londero, who played in the inaugural Cordoba Open down in Argentina. He's 25 years old, won his first match on the ATP level, and then won 4 more to win his first title. He's currently 5-3 on the ATP main tour, and those 5 wins all came this week.
He's up from number 112 to 69 in the rankings, and it's instructive to look at a guy like Londero and see how being just outside the top 100, you can exist in that space without ever really winning on the ATP tour or playing many matches. And also just how much a career boom it can be to have that one breakthrough. I mean, in his case, it was a huge breakthrough winning a tournament, but even going to the quarters of a main draw event, winning 2 or 3 matches in 1 week can make that huge difference between being in the 110s and then in the 70s and not having to qualify for a bunch of these events.
Mm-hmm. He got his ranking all the way to 112 off of challengers. In 2018, he stopped playing futures pretty much, played challengers, got 52 wins. Like the sheer amount of travel and work that you have to put in to get 52 wins on the challenger circuit is crazy for very little money. He won 2 challenger titles last year, but I was surprised that his ranking was so high, not having won any main tour matches at that time.
Darko Gernkarov.
Mm-hmm.
Guess who's back? Back again. Darko's back. Tell a friend.
Oh, really?
Really what?
We're quoting Eminem on this podcast? Paraphrasing?
I mean, it just came to me. What can I say?
Mm-hmm. Where to start with Darko? I still follow him, and he still follows me, so I don't want to jeopardize that. So I am compromised as a commentator here. I know a lot of y'all have been blocked recently. Darko started a GoFundMe for medical bills, for a surgery to repair what he says is nerve damage in his ear.
Stemming from his stroke.
Yes. As reported by Ben Rothenberg last year, there are questions, I guess, that have not been completely answered about who Darko is, if the pictures he's posting are him or another person.
Well, since that article, he seemed to have put aside aspirations for a professional career. Because where that was coming from was, in part, we kept hearing, oh, I'm going to be making my debut here, and then it'd be pushed back. And then you couldn't find any trace of him on the ITF tour, on the junior level. It was It was wild.
Right.
So, assuming that that whole mess was accurate in that he wasn't actually a player, I don't know. I don't know anything about that. Not here to comment on that. He became kind of an inspirational leader of the Twitter sphere, stealing and plagiarizing quotes here and there to uplift his followers.
Yes. Copying jokes from people, like tweets that were clearly stolen, but this is par for the course on Instagram and Twitter. Stefanos Tsitsipas, for one, does it. And I have a hard time getting too upset about it, because this is kind of what people do on social media now, is take other people's intellectual property or creative content and retweet it uncredited.
A bit of a side note, I do take some issue with Stefanos because he presents himself as being somewhat authentic, and visionary is too much of a strong word, but somebody who has some autonomy over his own creative direction and his etherealness and otherness. And so to then just present block quotes from other people unattributed as some kind of thought experience that it's going to be received as, wow, Stefanos is so deep.
Yes.
When you're presenting that image and then doing that, I come from an academic background, like that just doesn't fly with me. And so it does take the sheen off a little bit, in my opinion. That said, I'm told by a lot of folks that, as you said, this is what the kids do.
There are companies that make millions on doing exactly this.
Yeah,
lifting screenshots of people's jokes and passing them off as your own.
And also that it was explained by Frith, I think, on Twitter, that maybe it's the equivalent of us writing song lyrics in our journals when we're teens, folks our age.
Right.
We just didn't have social media to share it on back then. We would have done the same. It's possible. I just don't really like it.
No,
instance.
I agree. I don't really like it, but on the scale of things that we should be upset about, it's not really like riling me up.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
To each their own. And a reminder that you are allowed to be mad about multiple things at the same time.
That's true. But sometimes we have to, at least I have to pick my battles. Not saying that this isn't something you shouldn't be annoyed about.
And one that you are definitely not picking is with Darko Gernkrov, because you just want to see this play out. You want to see him on Ellen.
I am interested. There are some things that we know is that Darko Gernkrov is a real person. We know also that the person running this Twitter account has posted videos and photos that are not them.
The photos have been a lot more consistent lately.
They have. They're clearly the same person. We don't know if that is Darko or not, but they've been of the same person. We know that he admitted last year that some of the videos, like the video of him with the guitar singing and some of the tennis videos, were not him. He admitted that. So he set up this GoFundMe. The goal was $5,000. Some people donated, and he kept updating us about how many people had donated and how grateful he was. Not very long after that, he announced that he was suspending the GoFundMe and he wanted people to divert the funds to other worthy causes. Other people on GoFundMe who were more deserving, that he was content with living with a disability.
To quote him,
yes,
because that's what he said. And so what had clearly happened was there were some discrepancies surrounding the GoFundMe, insofar as I know for a fact from seeing on Twitter that at least a handful of people reported the GoFundMe as fraudulent.
Right.
And whether or not it is or isn't, we don't know. We really don't know. I mean, it's suspected.
Right.
It's plausible given what we know. But that was kind of, I mean, your camp in this regard, that was a little bit much for
My
folks
camp?
to be. Yeah, because you're
okay.
saying, like, let the guy be.
Well, I don't have a problem with reporting the GoFundMe if you believe that it's fake.
Yeah, but
I do have something of a live and let live philosophy about these things. Like, if you want to give money and you haven't properly vetted that person, then that's on you. Like, give the money. It's fine. Like, that's your choice. This need to kind of prove to everyone that you know that this dude is a catfish is a little odd to me. Like replying to every single tweet with, "Did you read this story by Ben Rothenberg?" Like, yeah, like, yo, we have Google. Like, we got it. Got it.
Question to you. Do you listen to our podcast? Because obviously, we've talked about it ad nauseum.
Now, after he suspended the GoFundMe, he reached out to the Ellen Show again. This is an ongoing preoccupation with this artist formerly known as Darko. He is obsessed with getting on the Ellen Show. And Ben talked about that a little bit in his story. One of the producers of the Ellen Show actually responded this time with consider it noticed. So responded to Darko, which induced this onslaught of people saying, "Do you know this guy's a catfish? Have you read this story?" And I'm just like, why are you all not here for this drama? Like, I don't understand.
Just let him go on Ellen and let him be found out if it's to be found out. And also let Ellen have some egg on her face. She kind of deserves it right now.
Are you that worried about the integrity of the Ellen DeGeneres show? Like,
she sure isn't.
Would it shatter the social fabric? I am here for this drama.
You're just here for all the mess.
I am.
In keeping with your reputation as being one of the messiest people around.
Oh, I have that reputation.
Yeah, you're known as at least of the two of us, you're much messier than I am.
I think a lot of that has been perpetrated by you.
No.
You're spreading it.
It's a self-titled album for you.
I am just wondering, why is everybody such a snitch? I just want to see more. I'm fascinated by the whole thing.
A bit of breaking news today. Less than 12 months since her return to the WTA Tour, Serena Williams has re-entered the WTA Top 10. Not through any active results of her own, but because of lack of results from a couple of folks, which have then back-ended her up the rankings.
Wow, that is a very uncharitable perspective.
I'm just describing how the actual re-entry happened.
She has played 8 tournaments since she's come back. She's made the final in 2 Grand Slams.
The quarters in the Australian this year.
She made it into the top 10 because Wozniacki pulled out of Doha just today, issuing a walkover, and Sevastova lost in her first match. Sevastova could have entered the top 10 for the first time. Petra Kvitova has decided not to play in Doha. She's defending the title, which means that Simona Halep, Caroline Pliskova, or Sloane Stephens can all take over the number 2 spot again. Wozniacki is down to 14.
But as far as Serena's concerned, you're chiding me just now for being uncharitable with respect to describing her re-entry to the top 10. But really, the true story here is just how incredible it's been, really. A lot of her return has been mired in controversy and a lot of talk, as is everything that she does. But the fact that she was able to come back from giving birth in less than 12 months, be back inside the top 10, starting from scratch, it's notable. Mm-hmm. It's not just notable, it's incredible, really.
Especially when she doesn't play that frequently. I was reminded, somebody posted this photo from one of the Venus and Serena documentaries a while ago. Serena and Isha were talking, and Serena said, "Venus and I are back in the top 5." And Isha said, "Girl, how are you both in the top 5 when you never play?"
Top 10, I think it was. But yes.
Indeed.
The point remains. Which leads us to the big news of this episode. Do you want to walk us through it?
Yesterday afternoon, Naomi Osaka tweeted, "Hey everyone, I will no longer be working together with Sascha. I thank him for his work and wish him all the best in the future." Just like that. It was terse, it was to the point, and most of us were not anticipating it. There had been some comments by Naomi in press at the Australian Open saying that she hadn't talked to Sascha that much recently. I guess now it's coming out that Naomi had some practices that lasted like 10 minutes. Sometimes in Australia she didn't even hit with Sascha. This is coming from the Japanese source Nikkan Sports, which was then repeated in English media by AFP today. But there is very little inside information coming out about this coaching split. Naomi has not commented further than this tweet, and nobody is leaking.
Sascha, for his part, responded to Naomi's tweet, and he said, "Thank you, Naomi. I wish you nothing but the best as well. What a ride it was. Thank you for letting me be part of this. And it's been noted by some sleuths on the internet that Naomi has not interacted with that tweet one bit. She has neither liked nor responded to that tweet. And if you go back to the Australian Open, you might recall when she was thanking her team, all she mustered for Sascha was "thank you for hitting with me this week," which was strange at the time. But you didn't know in the moment if it rose to the level of something's wrong or if it was just part of Naomi's weirdness.
Yeah, that's the thing, is people are very quick to read into Naomi's words and mannerisms and her manner in general, but she is fairly inscrutable to me. And maybe I'm just misinterpreting who she is, but I don't feel like she gives a lot away. She's not duplicitous. Like, I don't think she's even capable of that, but she's mysterious to me.
I think that's on you, frankly. I think she's very straightforward with what she says. And looking back, the fact that she was kind of not forthcoming with the praise for Sascha kind of was a telltale sign in retrospect. There was also folks talking about that moment in press where she was asked about Chris Evert and some of the advice that Evert had given her. And then she pivoted to say something along the lines of, well, you know, Chris is somebody who's done this, and maybe it's more believable coming from her than from Sascha. And it was like, okay, well, that's kind of funny. And it makes sense, but, you know, given what we know now, maybe that was another sign. That said, our Twitter timelines just devolved into a complete and utter mess and chaos after this news came out. And because of the terse nature of her tweet, a lot of folks started running wild with all kinds of theories as to what had happened.
Oh my God. I don't even want to give voice to the theories.
No.
Because there was this blind item by some rando account that is unnamed about, you know, insinuating something about a coach and a player back at the Australian Open. So then people ran with that. Oh, they must be referring to Naomi and Sascha. There were accusations that clearly Naomi has gotten too big for her britches, or she doesn't want to pay Sascha what he's worth, or I mean, all sorts of bizarre stories that are literally just cooked up out of nowhere because nobody provided any evidence, any receipts that they had inside information.
The most logical read on the situation to me, and what I thought immediately, was that, well, something happened behind the scenes that affected their relationship. And if you consider that a coaching pupil relationship is so fraught in that the coach is an instructor, he's a disciplinarian, or she is a disciplinarian, that they are oftentimes a friend. And in this case, it seemed that Sascha and Naomi were friends as well. And that was one of the things that worked well for them. But at the same time, there's the employer-employee dynamic that in the end supersedes everything. And so it's easy to see how, if something even small happened, could work to combust this situation. And to my mind, if my reading of Sascha, and from us sitting down with him in our one-on-one in Cincinnati, is that he's very loose-lipped and prone to say things he probably shouldn't say. And given that, it felt like only a matter of time before he may have stepped in it. And again, I don't know that this is something that has happened, but for them to have had this much success and for it to end so abruptly and tersely, it gives me the impression that something happened between the two of them. And it also makes sense to me that if something did happen, given the precarious point in her career that she's at right now, Naomi, in terms of being a new world number one, multiple Grand Slam champion, embarking on this new phase of potential greatness, like, you know, on a path to goatdom. Not like the GOAT, but, you know, that stratosphere where you win a whole bunch of titles, tens of millions of dollars. You are that person. You know, she could be the face of women's tennis for the next decade. Her ceiling is that high. And because she's that young, I can see how she and her family would want to close ranks and cut out all potential mess. within their ranks.
Mm-hmm. But again, this is speculation, right? Like you said, when we spoke with Sascha, there were things that were clearly off the record, but were not made clear that they should be off the record. We used our best judgment and did not share those things.
Yeah, talking to people you don't know in a room with other people you don't know who could be recording a whole bunch of things.
Right.
And were recording things, and that could have gotten out easily, but didn't seem to have a care. Mm-hmm. There was a level of unearned trust on his part with the people around him that, you know, could easily go wrong in the wrong situation.
Right. And I don't want this to sound inflammatory. It's not like crazy stuff. No. You know, it's not stuff that would like shake you to your core. It was just surprising how forthcoming he was to people he didn't know for a podcast he had never heard of. Right?
It's like you were just talking with friends at the bar.
Right.
At the end of it.
So he was a very endearing presence in that way. But you can see how that can go wrong. At the same time, we have no idea if this is about anyone's personality at all. You know, a lot of people jumped to, well, this must be about money. And I was wondering if I was being naive by not assuming that automatically. I feel that, you know, if it had been about money, the player puts up what is conventional in the sport. Whatever is standard to pay your coach at that level, mm-hmm. I'm sure the player would pay that.
Naomi has the money at this point.
And is Sascha in a position to be like, well, I want double what everybody else makes? I just can't see that happening. Why would someone threaten their position when they're in such a good place?
But that would be his want and his right, and it would be her want and her right to say no.
To say no, I want to work with you still, but I cannot honor it. Right.
That is the professional, 9 to 5 film that can be put over the relationship, right? Because all those are the things that we see about the two of them. We live in a shipping culture. It's not necessarily a romantic thing, but people ship coaches and players, and that's supposed to supersede everything else. But there's also this professional component, and if that is not working for whatever reason on either end, then by all means, move on. Mm-hmm. And that is just as valid for either of them.
The fact that there is so little real information has created such a vacuum for people to fill.
But the fact that that vacuum is going to be filled doesn't make me feel then that, either one of them should have been more forthcoming about what happened. I've seen a lot of people say, well, the way that was written, like, she's just inviting this speculation and she needs to come out and say something because this is just going to go on forever. And to my mind, having been around the game for a few years now, that was going to happen regardless. She could have told you exactly what had happened, and 75% of y'all would not have believed it. Y'all would have come up with your own theories anyway and run with it. And the nature of Naomi Osaka and her stardom right now is it exists in relation to Serena Williams and her fans, for better or worse. Part of the reaction to this news is colored by that as well, still to this day. And that's going to happen regardless forever. And so now what Naomi is faced with is, before it was like, well, she beat Serena at the US Open, but, all this other stuff was happening. Let's see if she can do it. Well, she did it at the Australian Open. Well, now she's doing it without the person who helped her get there. He was clearly the one who was responsible for it. Let's see what she's going to do next. It seems now, and it's not dissimilar to what we've seen with Serena chasing all these records, there's always going to be a goal that's a goalpost that's pushed for her to achieve something. And that's what's next for her. The entire narrative surrounding her going forward, regardless of how forthcoming or not forthcoming she is about this split, is how is she going to move on post Sascha. And the overriding narrative with that and the undertone is that he was very instrumental in helping her achieve these things. The idea being that without him she wouldn't have been able to do it. And I rebuke that, because we've always been very careful on this show to not give too much credit to coaches. There's this coaching celebrity culture now within tennis where we want to give all the credit to the coach. And it's especially the case in women's tennis, where it's often a male coach and a female player, And we've heard this repeated by some of the coaches themselves, that the difference between men and women's tennis is that the women are more emotional and they need that kind of authoritarian male presence, to settle them down, you know? And that's the undertone. And I rebuke it, and I also don't necessarily believe it, because especially in this instance, Naomi doesn't get to be number one in the world and a multiple slam titleist at 21 years old without incredible talent. And she was exactly at the age where it would have been natural for a maturation to happen. I'm sure Sascha helped with that. But to then think that, wow, she's ungrateful for all that he done and she wouldn't have been there without him, or that she can't, let's see the results now because like she's really going to struggle. I think that's it veers into misogyny. That's my read on it. And I know some folks have already come for me on Twitter to say, well, where are you hearing this? Most people aren't saying this, blah, blah, blah. I don't care about most people. I've seen it. I don't need to come with receipts to say, well, here, somebody even asked me, like, can you point to me some of these tweets? To quote, share, open your eyes, bitch.
Wherever you're tweeting from, I guarantee you it has Google too. A few things. A coach should be instrumental to someone's success, don't you think?
Sure.
That is a coach's job.
Yeah.
Regardless of gender, regardless of where in women's or men's tennis, a coach should be at least not responsible, but instrumental in someone's development and achievements. At the end of the day, the player has to go out and do it. In tennis, some players are maybe too quick to fire coaches. On the flip side, some players double down if they've achieved great success with this coach because maybe they're afraid to change the formula.
Or maybe loyalty is that important to them.
Right. But let's say you've won 2 majors, someone like Muguruza, you've won big tournaments with your coach. You feel maybe your coach has helped you to reach these great heights. Are you more hesitant to part ways with him in this case? And I think whatever has gone on in the relationship between Naomi and Sascha that caused the split, I think it shows a lot of confidence that she's willing to move on after achieving this incredible success at her age and try it with a different coach or no coach.
Yeah.
Whatever she chooses.
Think about it. If she was not really having even 10-minute practices with him at the Australian Open and not even really on speaking terms, really, they had such little interaction at a tournament where she troubleshooted through multiple 3-set matches and was able to win coming off of the US Open and secure back-to-back slams. If she did that without much influence or input from him, how much confidence can she not take from that experience?
Yeah. So you're not going to get a lot of speculation from us. We don't know what happened. I suspect very few people know what actually happened. And I think my hypothesis is that there's not actually a lot of there. Like the drama that we're looking for, the clashes, whatever, I don't really think there's a whole lot going on. Like the truth is probably a lot less interesting than what tennis Twitter thinks it is.
And remember, in your personal relationships, it takes such little breaches of trust to completely destroy relationships. It's almost never like a huge deal. It's not like, oh my God, he went out and cheated on me with 5 people last night. That's not what happened. It could be the tiniest betrayal of trust, the tiniest little crack in a relationship that makes you feel like, well, damn, like this is not what it was anymore. Like it's not what I need right now. And she's also maturing at a very specific age in her life. Maybe she needs something different as well.
Right.
There are all these small little things that it could be that we have no idea what it's about. And this idea that, oh my God, poor Sascha. Poor Sascha. I can't believe he was done bad like this. Let's be clear. Sascha will be fine. Sascha was hired for a job, excelled in that job, was paid for that job. And now his resume is lit. Lit right. AF. WTA Coach of the Year. He's coached the winner of the last 2 Grand Slams. He will land on his feet.
Right. He wanted to be taken seriously as a head coach and not a hitting partner. He's achieved that. Like you said, he's the 2018 WTA Coach of the Year. He will land on his feet. He'll be fine. There are a lot of top players who I'm sure would love to pick him up.
We're going to do this segment now that we've been talking about for weeks that did not make it to the final cut of any of our Australian Open episodes because there was just so much to talk about. We're going to be dealing with this ATP board drama.
Out of principle, I want to address the reason that we skipped this was not because it's boring. John Wertheim, who is a premier international sports journalist, said on Twitter that he didn't want to cover this on his podcast because it's boring. He said ATP board equals audience bored, B-O-R-E-D.
Well, he didn't say it was boring to him. He said it was boring to his audience.
Right, which I feel, as a reporter, one of the cardinal rules is that you don't talk down to your audience, right?
Sure, yes.
You don't assume that your audience is not interested in something.
I mean, he was trying to be clever with the wording of the tweet with B-O-A-R-D and then B-O-R-E-D.
Mm-hmm.
That was poor. But there is an element of his podcast relies on advertising.
Does it?
I don't know. I haven't listened. Do they have ads on it?
It is supported by Sports Illustrated.
Okay. So
I think
they track numbers.
I think they'll be okay.
Okay, but they track numbers, and that's important to them.
Right.
Probably definitely more so than it is to us.
Oh, you mean because we're not ad supported?
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like there's a relationship between your content and your audience, specifically in terms of getting people to listen, because that's how you judge your success.
I agree.
Right.
But the brush off annoyed me. And
absolutely.
The thing that I really try not to do, and I think we try not to do, is to underestimate your listeners. Because I typically assume that people who listen to this show probably know more than I do.
Yeah.
A lot of them know way more than I do, are smarter than me.
There's so much we don't know.
Right.
And we say that all the time.
Right. NT-way, there were some developments in the ATP governance saga during the Australian Open. Long story short, the vote on Chris Kermode's contract has been delayed to the next meeting at Indian Wells in March. The ATP Players Council did hold a vote the Sunday before the Australian Open about whether to extend Chris Kermode's contract past the end of this year. It's been reported by Simon Briggs, who is really the beat reporter on the ATP governance thing. It was reported that the vote ended tied 5-5, so it's been delayed. The Players' Council is going to gather more information. I suspect some of it is we want to see what the hell is going on with Gimelstob at that time. Briggs is assuming that the 5 who voted no to Kermode's extension are Djokovic, Querrey, Isner, Pospisil, and Rendy-Lou. We don't know that for certain. Ironically, since half of these people are dyed-in-the-wool conservatives, the revolutionary wing of the ATP Players Council, they want change. The way that this will eventually play out is that the ATP Board of Directors is the body that will vote on Chris Kermode's position going forward. Typically, the 3 members of the Board of Directors who are player representatives do vote according to the Players' Council's wishes. They're not required to, but that's typically how it works. So the Players' Council would vote, express their feelings on the matter, and then those 3 members of the Board of Directors who represent players would presumably vote according to the Players' Council's wishes. The issue did blow up a little bit at the Australian Open, which I think was foreseen. Stan Wawrinka issued this letter that was described as explosive, chastising the Players' Council for basically not being grateful for what you have, saying that Chris Kermode's tenure as the ATP president has seen a lot of progress, beneficial changes for players. He claims that a lot of the top players have not been consulted, even though the Players' Council has suggested that there was a pretty extensive consultation process before this vote.
Rafa said the same,
Right.
that he was not consulted.
Apparently, Andy Murray stood up in the players' meeting and said No players even know that a vote is happening. I wasn't consulted. Nobody I know was consulted. So a few of the kind of the top guys who've been around a while are suggesting that they were not contacted at all for their opinion. Again, so much of this stuff is happening behind the scenes. We can't really say what is true or not.
What is clear is that there was added attention to this issue because of Justin Gimelstob and his legal issues, and this was probably something that the board members and the Players' Council did not account for heading into Australia. Like, they did not think that this would have been a topic that would have had such added scrutiny, because for a lot of folks, the stakes were even higher because of Gimelstob's involvement. He flew down to Australia.
Right.
He wasn't working as a commentator, but he flew down specifically for this would-be vote. And you saw that maybe Djokovic was caught a little bit off guard in press. Because he ended up telling folks that many of the things that have been leaked to certain media are also not 100% true, calling it propaganda, saying that the issue is very complex and that there's no rush.
From my perspective, Djokovic was clearly annoyed that these things had made it to the press. He feels that there's a leak on the Players' Council, and his biggest concern is the information leak, not the subject at hand. I understand that A, there is no rush because the contract extends through the rest of this year. B, there's a lot of context that you and I don't understand, a lot of background that we don't know. And C, that this is an extremely complicated issue. I would argue that it's much more complicated for people ranked not number one. Djokovic can argue that players should receive a much higher percentage of the revenue of the Grand Slam tournaments, but my question, the overriding questions for me is he looking out for number one, or is he looking out for the rest of the ATP? I don't know his mind.
I don't think that's a fair question to him. I don't think he would be making these decisions solely for his own interest. But I do think that it's worth questioning whether him being a top 3 player for the majority of his career and currently world number 1, if that in itself colors his view of the situation in a way that disqualifies him from being able to represent players outside the top 100. Which is why there are people from all levels of the ranking system on the Players' Council, right? That's a safeguard there. But to your point, I don't think he has ill intentions in terms of representing everybody in the ATP. I just don't know if he's best equipped because of his exposure as world number 1 and 16-time Grand Slam champion. I can't keep count anymore. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You and I sat here a year ago and defended Djokovic when he was floating even the suggestion of a players' association or a players' union. All this sort of xenophobic criticism about unionization, about where he comes from. If the players are moving to unionize, I am generally all for that. What troubles me is Vasek Pospisil's letter that wasn't meant to be public, was leaked, was saying we need a CEO sympathetic to our interests. I think you should disabuse yourself of that notion right now. There will not be a CEO sympathetic to your interests. That's not how this works. You need either a players' union or that's it. A CEO of the ATP is going to represent where the money is coming from. It's going to represent tournaments disproportionately. An organization that's set up to represent tournaments, sponsors, and players is not going to side with the players as a matter of course.
And my issue here is I don't know enough, or I'm not involved enough or at all with this issue to be able to speak to whether or not Kermode is doing a good enough job to keep his job going forward. I don't have an opinion on that. These players clearly do. What gives me pause is people like Pospisil who are explicitly saying that Gimelstob is the person to do it.
Well, is it explicit, or is it we believe that we have the board, we have the board of directors necessary now to move forward.
Yeah, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
We have those player representatives who are going to speak for us.
Yeah.
One of those people is Justin Gimelstob.
And I want to know how much of this movement is with him in mind as the end goal. Because for me, that's untenable.
Right.
And we got Djokovic being asked about Gimelstob in press at the Australian Open, saying, "I'm comfortable, as are all of the council members. He's been someone that has always fought for the players' rights and represented players in a great way."
I think there's some disagreement to be had about whether Gimelstob represent the players fully. Kevin Anderson, as far as I know, has been the only one who explicitly said he's looking for a not guilty verdict. Because Justin has decided to go to trial. He's pled not guilty. According to some sources, he rejected a plea deal. I haven't seen that a lot, so I don't want to give a lot of credence to it. But the case is going to trial. Had he accepted a plea and possibly pled to either a misdemeanor or a felony, that probably could have hurt his career chances in the future with the ATP.
Djokovic was also asked about Stakhovsky, and then he said, "You can always focus on the negatives. There's always a person or two or three that in the past has stated something that is maybe not appropriate." And I think you have this here described as a big nothing sandwich.
It's nothing. These statements throughout the Australian Open by Djokovic have been a whole lot of kind of negative space. It's just a lot of words to mean absolutely nothing. I am all here for woke Djokovic, if you will. If he is someone who is leading the charge to unionize, if he has political motivations, I want to see it. But when he's asked explicitly, what do you think about Gimelstob? How do you feel about Stakhovsky's past comments about women and LGBTQ people? It's a whole lot of nothing. There's literally no substance behind the words.
And he's being a politician in that instance, because if he does say something, say he does feel akin to how we feel about these two people, right? Say, give him that. The political machinations of this situation would not really allow for him to turn his back on those people if his goal is to get Kermode out. Doing that would undercut that.
Right. So it's like, even if I have problems with these dudes, which I don't think he does, but even if he did, I am going to carry them along to achieve this end goal. And you see it when Nadal is asked questions about equal prize money. It's kind of like, well, this really doesn't affect me, so I don't care that much. So Stakhovsky said some offensive things. Have you thought that deeply about it? Do you know people who are actually impacted by those words and actions?
Well, even more so for Rafa. This time around, he was clearly agitated that he was being asked about this, even going so far as to say, well, why are you always trying to stir up drama, essentially? And then saying that he doesn't have enough information, that he's not the right person to ask, and why are you trying to drum up controversy all the time?
Which I get. There is an element of, we need a quote from this top male player on this. If it's a negative quote that is controversial, well, it's probably even better.
But at this point, he has nothing more to give, and he's doubly frustrated because he's answered it before and it's not been good.
He's
doubled down on it. This economic argument where he pointed to, well, what about female models? He
found the one job class in the universe where women are paid more. The idea that I don't have enough information, I have to do more research. Like, you have been out here for 15 years. When do you think you will have the information? Like, can we put a timeline on that? If you don't have it now, clearly you're not going to get it. It's very clear that you just don't care.
And for us, as these top players with this great stature in the game, you benefit from all this other stuff. It's incumbent on you to be informed. That's part of your gig at this point. As far as I'm concerned.
I feel
it's not good enough to say I don't know enough when you've had that much preparation to form an idea. I'd almost respect it more to be like, well, this is how I feel. I've said it before, I'll say it again, don't ask me again, because this is what I think. Women should not be paid the same.
Well, I can't say that I would respect that. But.
I mean, you wouldn't, you know what I mean.
I know. I just say, the benefits and privileges of being a superstar and being extremely wealthy and known all the world over, that kind of outweighs the minor inconvenience of being forced to have an opinion and express it about these things that you don't want to talk about. My questions going forward, which I don't think we're going to answer now, does the contingent that is anti-Chris Kermode, does that reflect the views of the majority of players? I don't think that's been answered fully yet, and it's something I'm very interested to know. Does the kind of anti-establishment contingent on the Players' Council reflect what a lot of players are expressing? And if so, that may have quite a bit of validity. Another question is the Players' Council working actively to make the ATP Tour more equitable for players who are ranked outside, say, the top 50? Do you think that there's a strong push for unionization? Does that sentiment change the further you go down the rankings? The farther away from multimillionaires?
And do they believe that Gimmelstab is the one to lead them to the mountain? You went up to the mountain and Gimmelstab was there. Is that what you think?
So those are some things I want to keep tabs of going forward. Tennis is really stingy with information. There are so few reporters working in tennis who don't rely on tennis for access, which is another sticky point of this sport because it is so small. But that's something, these are all questions that we are keeping an eye on moving forward this year.
I think that's also at this point a lazy take on it.
Oh, excuse me.
The fact is, especially for an issue like this, these players are in different cities all across the world every week. And there's only literally a handful of tournaments where you get them all in the same place throughout the year. And that's why we had this meeting happening in Australia and then again in Indian Wells. And if you're not being covered, if you're not being funded by a big paper or news organization like a lot of the Brits are, then you can't be on the beat. It's more than just access.
Right.
It's becoming more clear to me. Things we dislike and things we like.
Which do you want to start with?
Dislike.
Okay. Go ahead.
This is all about the Grammy Awards. You know, I was sitting there, and for the first half of it, it wasn't that bad. I was actually thinking to myself, wow, this is better than I recall. This is one of the better Grammy broadcasts that I've watched in recent years. And then the second half just turned to shit. Like, complete and utter shit, with the exception of Casey Musgraves winning Album of the Year. There was the J-Lo Motown tribute, which was a total abomination. Unreal. Like,
I'm still so angry about it.
She wasn't even singing.
Well, first of all, she was lip syncing.
At first I was like, wow.
The entire thing.
I was like, wow, she sounds better than I would have imagined. And then it's like, let's watch those lips.
Cardi B was lip syncing her entire performance, by the way. But I like Cardi. And she wasn't enlisted to do a Motown tribute.
And then when I realized, after waiting the entire broadcast to watch the Aretha tribute, one of the veritable GOATs in the history of music died last year, and she gets one song in tribute on the broadcast, and it's one of her shorter songs. Natural Woman is one of the shortest songs in her catalog.
The whole thing lasted 3 minutes, right?
It lasted not even as long as Jennifer Lopez was gyrating on that piano.
Supposedly there's a special coming, like a special tribute to Aretha later in the year. I heard.
Which is neither here nor there, because as you said to me that night, how many times have we sat through like these 70-odd-year-old white men doing 10 minutes of their old dried up songs
like Neil
that
Young
nobody cares about, Bob Dylan.
Oh my God. Joined by Eddie Vedder. Like, come on.
Crazy stuff. And so, yeah, I was not about that life. And then, okay, we got a rap song winning big awards. This is America. However, for me, that song was not good. And for me, that song was pandering very specifically to white people. And that's why it won.
Yeah. Would it have...
Like, there's nothing that white people love more than racial porn.
But would it have won without that video? No. Like,
I don't mean to say racial porn. That sounded bad. But you know what I mean? Like, racial strife porn.
Well...
Essentially.
I mean, the video was violent and triggering and horrible. And it was meant to say something much more profound. I don't know. We could argue about whether it did or not. But the song would be a non-factor had the video not come out. Like, you would not know the song. I'm just like, in the past 35 years, almost 40 years of hip hop at the Grammys, this is it. Like, this is the first song you choose to honor with Song or Record of the Year. I'm just confused.
Yeah.
Although I actually think the Grammys was overall quite good. For me, it's not a thing I dislike. So the Aretha Franklin tribute was too short, but you got two of the greatest singers working today, Fantasia and Yolanda Adams, able to do their thing. Unfortunately, Fantasia needs time. Like, she started to bounce, and that's when you know she's winding up. And before she fully wound up, the performance was over. We didn't even get a lip quiver. But
you're right, the show felt younger. It felt fresher.
Janelle Monáe's performance, Casey Musgrave's performance, very understated. Brandi Carlile absolutely brought the house down.
Yeah, that was
she
amazing.
worked the hell out of that song.
Lilith Fair realness.
So many great performances by women. And the awards overall actually weren't that bad. Like you said, Album of the Year went to Casey Musgraves. Janelle Monáe would have also been a great choice. This was not a Beyonce Taylor Swift year.
Okay, fair enough. Those things were just that disgusting to me. I did not like it.
Fair enough.
Things we do like, however, is One Day at a Time.
Y'all, this show is amazing. I know some of you may have watched the One Day at a Time in the early 80s. Way back in the day, the original Norman Lear sitcom. This is also produced by Norman Lear, a Cuban Latin American spin on it. And like, the performances are so good. It is a throwback to old sitcoms.
Laugh track.
The
live
format
studio audience.
seems old-fashioned, but they confront any issue you could possibly think of, and they confront it in a human way that is honest about who their characters are. Like, it never seems forced down your throat.
No.
It's not like a very special episode kind of thing.
And it's definitely improved from season to season. This was season 3. Season 3 was, as much as the show is great, season 3 was twice as good as the first two combined, in my opinion. Because nothing about it felt forced. There were so many instances where a lesser show or even that show in season 1 may have gone a different direction. And they're like, no, we don't need to. This great self-awareness from the writers and the actors that we are in this space where we can make these bold, unconventional choices for this format. And we're good.
Right. And they're in a place now where they know who their characters are. They can approach really difficult subject matter and keep it difficult. Sitcoms as a form often, at the end of every episode, it resets. When you've reached the next episode, you don't have to have seen the previous one to get what's going on. But sometimes it lets you sit in, wow, this is a really difficult topic, and there's not a lot of resolution to be had at this time.
Nor do you have to force some laughter in it because you're allegedly a comedy.
Yeah.
They're in their sweet spot and they know it.
Justina Machado, who I first knew from 6 Feet Under almost 20 years ago, finally has a starring role on a show, and she is everything. It would not work without her.
Rita Moreno, who, West Side Story, legend of the business, working for 70 odd years now, 60, 70 years. She's 87 years old and dancing up a storm on this show. She's a scene stealer, but also I felt in season 1 that while I adore her, and I adored her on Oz, that's when I first became exposed to Rita Moreno. And, we get every once in a decade this kind of role. We last saw it with Betty White on Hot in Cleveland, where we have this legend coming back in their twilight, in their uber twilight, to give us something special. And that in itself is oftentimes meant to be enough. But in this instance, Rita Moreno is giving us that much more. And she's a legit Best Supporting Actress in a Comedy nomination for her role in season 3, in my opinion.
So stream this show because we want a season 4.
On that note, thanks for listening. Next episode will be our 150th. Don't know if we're going to be
Wow.
doing anything
Our
special.
sesquicentennial.
We have not thought about it. My name is Jonathan. You can find me on Twitter at tennis_John.
I'm James. I'm at ElliotJMR.
2 L's, 2 T's.
We are at The Body Serve on both Twitter and Instagram.
Thank you for all the folks who have given us reviews on iTunes. There have been quite a few, especially since the start of the new year. It's been wonderful. We thank you. We urge you to continue to do the same. Again, it's one of the tangible ways that you can help us build the profile of the show by letting other people know what you think about it, only if it's positive. That is the qualifier. And also, we'll go a bit further in, if you are on Twitter, tag us and tell people what you like about the show. We'll retweet it. You know, just build the profile a little bit.
Not above retweeting praise.
No.
We're not at that level yet.
Till next time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.